Welcome to a very special edition of Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the events, news, and issues surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling and other things that affect New Japan Pro Wrestling. And that's kind of the theme today. My name is Stephen Conway. With me, as always, is Jeremy Finestone. We are contributors to the Fight Game Media Network. And Jeremy, special edition, we have uh, another person who is heavily involved with the Fight Game Media Network, an expert in the field that's going to come in very handy very, very soon. The Bushi Road company, the conglomerate that owns New Japan Pro Wrestling, also owns Stardom. And we are very excited that there are going to be some women's matches on New Japan shows, mostly outside of Japan, but including their major events. And this is something totally new. And we get to talk about it with somebody who really knows. He really knows what's going on with that organization, the history of it, the people involved with it. And we're going to get a real primer here to get us ready for this.
Yeah, we got Scott Edwards joining us today, and I can't tell you how excited I am to have this guy. Honestly, he's the go-to guy to talk about Joshi Pro Wrestling. He has his own show on our network, the Five Star Joshi Show. He's really the guy that kind of defines what I should be excited for, and the enthusiasm that is built with Stardom intersecting with New Japan. A lot of it is born from just the dialogues I see that he has about what's going on in Stardom, and it gets me curious. So I'm really excited to have this guy on because he's going to be able to really shine a light on what Stardom is, what we can expect from the Stardom performers, the wrestlers themselves, and some of the major storylines, the wrestlers, the stables, and the titles, and the hierarchy of how everything works. And honestly, there aren't a whole lot of guys that I think can do this for us and for the audience in general, but he's one of them. So how about we bring him on? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this will be a lot of fun, and then we can bring him in and really get the lowdown going here. Sure.
Fantastic. Let's do that. Hello, Scott. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today. I'm always happy to talk about Stardom, especially. I was gonna say Joshi, but this is all about Stardom, which is always that's my bag, as the kids say. That's my most comfort level to talk about. But thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, just give me a little bit of background here. How long have you been following pro wrestling? How long have you been following Joshi Pro Wrestling? And how long have you been analyzing and critiquing it in a way that most people, that the absence before you started doing it? How long has that been going on?
So I'm 23. So I've been watching wrestling since I was probably 8. Started with WWE, of course, and then over time you kind of pick up new things. I think everyone does that, right? At least here in the States, I feel like WWE or WCW, of course, were the go-tos. But I started watching Joshi, actually, specifically Stardom, during 2020. So it actually hasn't been as long as some people. But COVID hit, right? And all American TV went to the warehouse shows, as I like to call them, the shows in front of no one,
right?
And that left me kind of sitting there like, I need something new, because I'm kind of losing it, right? As a wrestling fan, and New Japan was shut down, of course, and I was a New Japan fan as well, but everyone was shut down, or I was watching, again, wrestling in a warehouse. So my good friend Alex, gave me this whole list, Stardom history, like 75 matches throughout their history, must watches. Watched every single one, and I've been locked in ever since. I've went back in time to watch, the greatness of Aja Kong and Akira Hogato, and I still have to do a lot of that because there's just so many matches. But Stardom has been where I've just, based myself, and I've been critiquing it pretty much ever since I finished that list, right? Like once that list was completed, probably late 2020, this has been the thing I love doing. Of course, I started the Five Star Joshi show with Parker on the Fight Game Media Network over a year ago now, which is kind of crazy to think about, that I've been going for over a year, and it's just become more opportunities. I've helped bring Joshi to Fightful, which is awesome. Really excited what I'm doing there, interviewing wrestlers, which, with the language barrier, of course, that can be difficult, but it's been really cool. And yeah, I mean, Joshi is like, I think if anyone who gets into it, you'll understand why. I think you'll understand why some people are always so upset about women's wrestling here in the States, because it can be so special and so good, right? And we're in the middle of the best tournament. The G1 for so long was, I think everyone says, the best tournament in wrestling. And now I fully think it's the 5-star Grand Prix. Now, if the G1 went back to 2 blocks, then we're having a conversation. but when you have Chase Owens, I'm not a big fan of Chase Owens. I had to put that little jab in there. But yeah, I highly. I've been doing this for now probably about 2 years now. It's been absolutely lovely. It's a great time.
Okay,
well, I'm sorry. I wanted to just mention that the term Joshi is unusual. It doesn't apply to men's wrestling, and for some of the folks here that are watching that might not understand, that's kind of a catch-all term for Japanese women's wrestling, Joshi, and it applies not only to Stardom but to the other promotions in Japan. It goes back in history, really. It goes back decades, and women's wrestling has been around in Japan almost as long as men's wrestling. It's not anything new. It's just a different culture, isn't it? It's got we're bringing these things in because Bushiroad felt that in North America and in other places, in England, which we're about to see, of course, with Royal Quest, which is why we're doing this, because the IWGP Women's Tournament is about to start. But there's a culture of having now women's matches on the shows. It's just kind of expected. And people asked a lot to me sometimes. They said, why aren't there any women's wrestlers in New Japan? I said, well, because they have their own promotions. I mean, it's not that they've been left behind. I said, I have to just say, it's not that they've been left behind. They're far ahead. There are entire multiple touring companies, thriving companies that have really been very successful, that run only women's shows right there. So what we're seeing is this kind of an interesting thing. These people aren't coming into New Japan, so to speak. These are Stardom matches and Stardom wrestlers on New Japan shows. So it's not like these people are leaving Stardom and coming to New Japan, but these two promotions underneath Bushiroad are going to be working together. And Scott, I believe also that the Stardom people are going to be doing the booking on this, not Gedo, who books New Japan. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So I think what their goal is to work together, obviously, but it will be, the booker of Stardom is Rossi Ogawa. He will lead that up, but I do think he is doing his best to work with them, but it is more so the Stardom say, and I think that's kind of what you're seeing with this bracket coming together. They have international stars, and, we're using that term loosely, but it's a smart idea in terms of you have collaboration, but at the same time, you're going to have the heart of what Stardom has always been at the same time, if that makes sense, because, with the IWGP Women's Championship, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I know some Stardom fans legitimately were a little scared of it because they don't want that title to surpass the titles that Stardom have built over their 11 years, right? So that's the game we're playing here. But I do think that in collaboration, their goals are to book this together, but Stardom will have majority of the say because, of course, they know the talent more than, Gato.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And you mentioned earlier that you started watching wrestling when you were 8 years old. I did as well, except it was 1983. So, but I'll pause while everyone does the mental math on that to see how old I am. But, the thing is about women's wrestling, you said something that I think is important. You get to see what women's wrestling can be. Now, we have moved forward in the United States quite a bit. There are some really good female workers in the United States, in the WWE, a few in AEW, and it is, I would say, at a better place than it's been in a long time. I remember growing up when the women in United States promotions were booked mostly by Fabulous Moolah's troupe, and Moolah learned how to wrestle in the 1950s and never learned another thing the rest of her life. And she taught all of her trainees to work like they were in the 1950s and things. So when I first started becoming a tape trader, again, dating myself, in college, some of that stuff that would come over were the All Japan women's matches.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's when I started to see things like the Crush Gals and the Beauty Pair, which is actually predates the Crush Gals, late 70s, Jackie Sato stuff. And you saw this team called, and this one might be familiar to some people, the Jumping Bomb Angels. And they came into the very first Survivor Series. There was a women's match at the first Survivor Series. And WWF at the time didn't have 10 women to put in the damn thing. So they got the Jumping Bomb Angels, who lit the entire building on fire. No one had seen anything like that. And it kind of caused a sensation. I was only like 12 or 13 when that happened. And all we wanted were just tapes of these women's matches from Japan. It looked totally different. And, you know, even now they work a very different style than American wrestling, just like New Japan works a different style than WWE and things. So can you talk to us a little bit about the style of wrestling we're going to see when these women come in? Because it's different than New Japan, even though it's also Japanese.
Yeah. So the familiarities that you'll have between New Japan and Joshi or Stardom is it's all snug, right? It's all physical. It's all violent. That is Joshi at its best. Is, you know, it's all about the in-ring action, and that's how they tell the stories, and that's very familiar, I'm sure, to New Japan fans. What you won't see is that you won't see these matches probably going for the 40-minute epics. All Stardom championship matches are 30 minutes to begin with. So unless it is the Utami Hayashishita versus Shuri match, which of course Dave Meltzer rated at a 5.5 for those who may not have checked it out. Highly recommended, by the way. But that was a different case. But what Joshi does is their matches are fast paced and you feel like you're always going, and the action, it always draws you in. No matter what the match may be, no matter who the opponents may be, if it's a main event, you know you're going to get delivery. And every wrestler is different, of course, right? You know, you watch New Japan, Kota Ibushi, and I know Kota's not around right now, but you know, Kota Ibushi and Tetsuya Naito are very different, but you put them together and it's magic. And my best example is, if you know what Stardom is, Tam Nakano is a storyteller. That is her entire meaning, right? She tells stories. She'll literally write like 5 tweets in a row of thread to explain the story going into the match for those who may not know, which is very nice, I think, especially if you're just jumping in, right?
Sure.
But
context
once the match starts, it's almost like you don't even need to know that it's personal between these two, or between whoever she's wrestling, whoever anyone's wrestling. You know, this coming weekend, while there is Royal Quest, there is also the finals of the 5-Star Grand Prix, where you have all these matches and then you have the final. My best example is you get Julia and Suzu Suzuki. Their story is from outside of Stardom, from before they were even there. You know, Ice Ribbon is another Joshi promotion. They started there. They were friends. Julia, of course, the major part. You saw her on the opening slate. She's, you know, one of the biggest stars in Stardom. And you will know the moment that bell rings that those two just want to kill each other. And that's, I think, something that they're so good at explaining, right? And it's so easy to get into because the match isn't going to go more than 15 minutes. There's a time limit on it. You're going to get right to the point. And that's, I think, what differentiates Joshi from New Japan. The Puro style, you work up to the ultimate moment. Joshi, unless it's like Tomohiro Ishii, is like you just boom, 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 violence right off the bat. And I love both styles, but they're both very different despite having a lot of similarities.
It's very fast paced too, isn't it? I mean, the cardio is tremendous on these women. And
well, there's a high speed title. So like there is a legitimate title where they are just running around the ring trying to outmaneuver stuff. You know, do you guys remember when Ricochet and Ospreay did what they did and people freaked out about it?
Yes.
Yeah. So like I think it was Azumi and Starlight Kid did something like that early in the year, and like Disco Inferno or someone got mad about it. And then Kenny Omega is like, well, this is like world class and better than anything you could ever try. And like that is, yeah, they go, there's levels of the speed they go.
Okay.
And it's really enjoyable.
I got a couple of question bullet point things that I want to get out of the way so that people who watch this will just be able to understand a few things. Sure. So when you said you had those 75 matches that you watched prior to 2020, how long a period of time was that? Was that like
Like-
2015 to 2020 or 2010 to 2020?
It was from the beginning, so 2011
Okay.
to 2020.
And is there a way for a viewer to go back and watch those? Is there a streaming
Yes.
service or? So
Yes,
tell me about the
so-
streaming service.
So the streaming service is called Stardom World, much like New
Okay.
Japan World. You can sign up on there. It unfortunately doesn't have its entire history because some matches were lost when they were changing servers, but they very slowly upload them. But it's very full. Like I think for the most part, if you're looking for a big Io Shirai match, it's likely there. And
Okay,
if
cool.
it's not there, guess what? There's this wonderful thing called Google that I think almost any way you will find it one way or the other, but almost everything's there, especially if you're looking for those big prime time matches.
Is it a monthly
Yeah,
payment or
monthly,
is it a
it's-
pay-per-view kind of style?
So it's monthly. It's about $7
Okay.
or so. Yen is going down, so it's like it changes every few months. But the other thing I will say though, Stardom World does not air their shows live. That is the
Yeah.
one difficulty that they haven't switched over to yet, and supposedly they're signed to a contract with whoever is serving with them. So hopefully, my dream, if anyone knows what Wrestle Universe is that we get a Bushi Road version of that, because a New Japan Stardom all-in-one combo is the dream for me. But hopefully they can get their live shows on a service, because right now it's all pay-per-view.
It's also, I want to mention this. I am a new subscriber to Stardom World. I signed up 2 days ago as I was getting ready for this whole thing, and I've already burned through a lot of the certainly not the whole tournament. I'm not trying to say that, but I've gone through and picked up a lot of the top matches over the last couple of days, and they are, like you said, they're 15-minute time limits. They're very digestible bites. It's very nice.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say is it is not as user friendly as New Japan World. There is not a the English translation is basically what you get from Google Translate, not so much anything. So it can be tricky. It took me don't give up is what I'm saying at home. It took me a while to get my date of birth in, so I wasn't sure what format they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So and they don't really tell you. It can.
There's a guide on like Reddit.
Yes, that's exactly right. I was just about to say. So I Googled that, and it came up with there is an idea. Somebody who is nice enough on Reddit to put together how to sign up. So I would recommend doing that. It's going to save you a bunch of time and a bunch of
what
heartache.
streaming devices can I find it on? Is it the Fire Stick? Just the Fire Stick, or
it's just online.
Yeah, it's just
like
there's nothing. It's
like New
you pull
Japan
out the
World.
laptop or the tablet and you just go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
My recommendation is hopefully you have a way to AirPlay to your TV, like I
for
do.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I also find myself say I'm watching the pay-per-views live. I usually am on my computer because I got one screen doing this and then writing up results. So
yeah, I'm a 40-year-old guy. I'm doing New Japan watching as a side bonus benefit. Any information that someone can provide me, as with the audience, that makes their life easier to find this and get going.
Yeah,
I want to facilitate that.
Yeah.
I always recommend the computer.
I got one more question for you. Quickly, what about the titles in Stardom? So, the title hierarchy, you said there was a speed title, and I know that there's two main titles, and that there's also a title that this New Japan Stardom crossover is going to be introducing. Are there other titles? How does this all work?
Are there titles? We got titles.
We got titles.
Man.
So it starts at the top, the World of Stardom title. It's your world title belt. But funny enough is you have the world title and you have the Wonder of Stardom title. And when you join and you jump into Stardom, you automatically think it's like the Intercontinental Championship. It really isn't. They both are very specifically designed. As I brought up Tam Nakano earlier, she was a Wonder of Stardom champion for a reason. She was a storyteller and her matches were very story-based. While the world title, you're looking for your, full-on work rate. Shuri's currently the champion. She's, one of the best in the world for a reason. They go back and forth. There are people that win both. Mayu Iwatani, who is the equivalent, for those who may want to know, of like a Hiroshi Tanahashi to Stardom. She debuted on the first Stardom event. She's still there. Like
Wow.
that, it's her company. It's she's been her and Stardom are linked forever. And the day she leaves is the day I just give up wrestling fandom as a whole. But that's that's beside the point.
My goodness.
So you have those top two belts. They're almost equal because the Wonder will main event. So the biggest show that they've had, the All Star Dream Cinderella in the Nippon Budokan, the Wonder of Stardom title main evented that show. It was a hair versus hair match. Julia versus Tam Nakano, and hair versus hair, by the way, in Joshi is a lot more serious than if you're watching in WWE or something like that.
Something else with a very long history is of
Yeah.
highly emotionally charged
Oh,
matches
yeah.
in Joshi history, definitely.
Very much so. So those are your top titles. Like we know, the IWGP Women's title is coming into play. I still have no idea how that's going to work. They've said the plan is that it will be defended on major New Japan shows, and it might be defended on major Stardom shows, but there's no guarantee there. But the whole goal is that they're somewhat separated, so it doesn't take over for those top two titles. Like I said, the high speed title, that title's tricky because it's like a cruiserweight title, and that only so few people are really in that division. You have the SWA title, which is supposed to be a title where you can't defend it against someone from the country you are from. So it was a way to wrestle with international wrestlers, but since COVID, that became really difficult. They reopened the rules, and Shuri had it because she technically isn't from Japan, so she was able to defend it against a bunch of people, but it gets very tricky. And that title, I think, is going to be effectively useless once the IWGP title comes into play, because that title will be the traveling title. You have the Artist of Stardom title, which is the trios belts. Best way to explain those.
What is it called?
The Artist of Stardom.
And that's just
championship.
trio.
Yeah, that's trios
Okay.
titles. Then you have the Goddess of Stardom titles, which is the tag team belts. I think that. Oh, and the Future of Stardom title, which kind of gives you a look at the future. So, say you had Young Lions wrestling for a belt, that would be what it is. Like the current champion is the most decorated Future of Stardom champion ever already, and she's probably going to lose it soon, which is Hanan. But yeah, there's a lot of belts. A lot of belts, but it's easy to track, and it does make shows better. They'll defend them on house shows, they'll defend them on pay-per-views, but a lot of belts to follow.
So with this in mind, we have this tournament beginning to create another one. The IWGP Women's Championship. Now, the very first match in this tournament is going to take place at Royal Quest. It's unusual, though, because the two women involved in the match aren't actually Stardom wrestlers, are they? Make sure I get it. Now, Jazzy Gabbard is one of them. I know that she, on night one, I'm bringing it up now, pardon me. Jazzy Gabbard and, Ava White, will be the wrestlers in the very first match, but then we're going to be seeing more tournament matches, some on Stardom shows, and we're going to be seeing that title. Of course, the champion will be crowned at the cross-promotional event in November. So, Scott, I'd imagine they probably, if they book anything like New Japan does, don't want to say who else is in this tournament, because I would imagine the results of the 5-star tournament would play into who is theoretically available to be in this. Am I correct on that?
Yes,
Okay.
you are. So the international bracket side is the only one we know. So, like you said, we have Jazzy Gabbard, who's known as Alpha Female in Stardom. She's a former World of Stardom champion, the second ever, actually. So history there. And then there's Ava White, who, I'm going to be honest with you guys, never seen her wrestle.
We haven't either. We were talking about that on our show. Yeah.
I don't even think she has a cage match. Like, I don't even think she has that much. It sounds like she's going to get destroyed because Jazzy is kind of working her way back into a story right now. And then the bi wrestler everyone knows is Kairi, the former Kairi Sane. So very exciting there. Kind of gives you a hint of who's probably going to the finals. And then they informed everyone that the other side, the Stardom side, will be decided based off of the 5-star Grand Prix. So it's probably going to be with whoever has the most points, and if they're tied, there's 4 of the 6 groups representing. So Stars, Queen's Quest, Oedo Tai, and Donna Del Mondo will all have one person in there based off of 5-star Grand Prix results.
So
And these
how
groups.
many,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy. Pardon me.
So how many people are in the Grand Prix right now, and how many people are going to be in the tournament following?
26 right now.
Okay.
2 blocks, 26. Not all Stardom wrestlers. Some of them are outside. And then only 4 are going to actually enter the IWGP. So 1 from each group, which is interesting that they went that route. And I believe that the tournament matches will be on October 23rd on the opening show for Stardom's Tag League as well. So that's where Kairi will face the winner of the match from Royal Quest, and then we will see other tournament matches from the other side that we still don't know.
I wonder if they'll mention the results on the Rumble in the Bronx pay-per-view when because they're going to want to pump that information and make sure it's out there.
Rumble on 44th Street,
Rumble
folks.
on the 44th. I keep
Rumble
getting
on the
that
Blocks.
wrong.
Rumble on the Bronx is a Jackie Chan movie, and an excellent one. An excellent one.
It is, but probably not gonna. Yeah.
If you search for Rumble in the Bronx, you will not be disappointed. However, you will not get a pro wrestling show either. So.
If it makes anyone feel any better, I have already bought both nights of the pay-per-view on Fight TV, so I can get it wrong, even though I can't seem to get it right.
So worth noting. So we have Kairi back in this whole thing, and of course she was Kairi Sane in WWE for a while. But before that, she is a former 5-star Grand Prix winner, I believe. Isn't she, Scott? Yeah, she's won this thing.
She is a former winner. She's a former Wonder of Stardom champion, World of Stardom champion. She did it all. She is as decorated as can be.
Now, it's interesting, though, that you mentioned the points in the 5-star tournament could come up with this. And boy, there's a bunch of points I want to get to on that. You mentioned things like, you mentioned names like Oedo Tai. You mentioned Donna Del Mondo. Let's talk a little bit about that. These are factions, and it's similar to what we get with Chaos, what we get with Los Ingobernables de Japón, what we get with Suzuki-gun. And this whole thing in Japanese wrestling dates back to sumo. There are stables in sumo wrestling where these guys live, train together, and that kind of went over into this version, a version of this in pro wrestling. So the Stardom goes into that as well. I have seen Oedo Tai described on NJPW 1972 as demonic. So I would take it that they're the heels. In this, where are these guys as far as what are these women, pardon me, these wrestlers in terms of who are we rooting for and who are we cheering for, who are we booing?
Yeah, the funny thing about Stardom is that they don't have many heels. It's kind of like you got your ultra baby faces, you got your one heel group, which is Oedo Tai, and then everyone, they kind of play in the middle. You can either cheer them or boo them. Like Donna Del Mondo with Julie as a leader, she's just kind of like a jerk. So like you can love her or you can hate her. She doesn't care. So Stars is like the ultimate baby faces. That's led by Mayu Iwatani, as I brought up earlier. They just kind of have that likable quality to them, as are the Cosmic Angels. They're also very baby face driven, but they're all former idols, models. Like that's kind of the group there. They're all former like idols. That's the best way to use it. That all kind of connects them because idols are very popular. Joshi, Tam Nakano leads that group. They also have Queen's Quest, which was originally started by Io Shirai. For those who know who Io Shirai is, that was her group. Would be her group if Triple H didn't come back into WWE Power, but I will not cry about that. So that's led by Utami Hayashishita. She's very big deal. Of course, she was in that match that was so highly praised last year as the champion. Like I said, Oedo Tai, the heels, the dastardly heels. They've kind of changed it up over the past year, though. They used to cheat a lot. Like it would almost be like House of Torture annoying. Sorry, but since Starlight Kid and Momo Watanabe have come to the group, it's changed, and they have a little cooler feel. They'll still cheat a little, but not to the extent that ruins the match, right? It's like smart cheating in a way. And then you have Donna Del Mondo, like I said, they are kind of the cool tweener group. You can cheer them, you can dislike them, you can pick between the two. And then you have the new group, God's Eye, which is led by Shuri. The group is Shuri, Mirai, Ami Sarai, and newly added Tomoka Inaba. They're brand new. They started this year. Shuri was in Donna Del Mondo, but she's been world champion now since the end of last year. She won the 5-star Grand Prix last year. It's time for her to get her own group. She's actually the oldest wrestler in Stardom as well, and a former UFC fighter, for those who don't know.
All kinds of things going on there.
That's
cool.
quite the platitude.
A lot of groups, not a lot of heels, not a lot of babyface. Just kind of like you watch and you pick who you like. That's the best thing about it. Though Oedo Tai, they will do the best to make you hate.
I've kind of argued with Conway a few times that Bullet Club is really the only true heel faction in New Japan right now, and everything else has shifting shades of gray, if you will. Suzuki-gun and United Empire. Both of them are definitely leaning more heel, but there's aspects of them that you can get behind. And there have been moments where the company has leaned into getting them cheered rather than actively getting them to boo them. The only ones that they're focusing on as the overall bad guys is Bullet Club. They've shifted all of that. So it sounds like there's a very similar model of root for all the people you want. This is the group that you should really keep an eye out for.
Yeah. The Bullet Club comparison's perfect. The House of Torture stuff doesn't go as deep, though. I'll tell you that.
That's good news. That's good news.
If that bothers you, as a New
probably
Japan fan,
better off to avoid that.
Better off.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that the top point scorer for each group is going to get into those tournament spots. Now that could be anybody. I'm looking at the current standings of this tournament, and it is and I mean this in the best way possible, and I do mean it as a compliment. It is an unholy mess on top of this tournament here, and in a beautiful way. There are there might be out of 26 a dozen people still mathematically in this thing going into the final day, and what I'm asking is that you mentioned how seriously this title is going to be taken. If they were getting the top point scorers from each group, and there are this many top people involved, I mean, this early sign is that Stardom is going to put this title on somebody that's pretty high up the ladder. This is not going to be like a mid-Carter's belt, is it?
No, it is not. It's a very important belt. I think that's their main goal, because this belt is going to be used to bring Stardom worldwide in a lot of ways. Whoever's this champion is going to be their face of their worldwide expansion, which is something that they've mostly just started to focus on, because they're also really focused on expanding just throughout Japan. That's why they've grown to the number 2 promotion in Japan, which that they're only behind New Japan, which is, New Japan's a monster, so I don't see them catching up. But throughout COVID, I think the official number that was reported was they've improved their ticket sales by 220%, which is just insanity.
That's tremendous. That's tremendous.
And that's why they don't have cheering crowds, because they just go out and they sell out Cork, instead of
they don't need to.
Right. They're not going to lower it to 700 just so you can cheer. They're going to keep making money, and people are going to keep going. So this belt's going to mean a lot, and I've said since the moment it's opened up, Mayu Iwatani's the obvious answer. Now that Kairi's in the tournament, I think that does change a lot of things, because who's known more in Stardom than Kairi? No one. It's just the truth.
Yeah.
So to me, it's going to be between Mayu Iwatani, Kairi, which, if you are into Stardom lore and Stardom wonderfulness, they were a former group known as Freedom, which is Mayu Iwatani, Kairi, and Io Shirai. That was the group, and just all those names alone, you kind of get the picture. Mayu's the longtime ace. Her nickname's the Icon. You got Kairi. Everyone knows who Kairi is, but I don't have to explain Kairi. And Io Shirai was if you had a Mount Rushmore, she would be number 1. All 3 of them would be on there. So that should tell you all you need to know. But it looks like that they're making this match as big as possible for a star crossover, and it will be Mayu versus Kairi, which, again, you can't beat it.
We're on board for that one, definitely. So yeah, who else do you see? I mean, I've seen Starlight Kid wrestle both at the Tokyo Dome during Wrestle Kingdom and other places. Julia's fabulous. Who else on this list do you think New Japan fans who maybe haven't seen a whole lot should look forward to? Maybe some of the people they should look forward to the most.
Yeah, so Julia, I'm guessing won't be in it because she is very much. I'm very like 95% certain she's winning the 5-star Grand Prix. So you keep her out because she's been destined for the World of Stardom title forever. But you look at DDM, for example, it's the easiest way to call them instead of calling them the whole thing. Micah and Hameka, they're both neck and neck in the tournament right now. They're wrestling on the final night. That'll decide who's going through. So if one wins, that's probably who. Micah is someone that if you see Puro fans kind of come over to Joshi, that is who they connect with a lot. She's she has that epic style pace to her big matches, if that makes sense. Like she'll build and build and build, and then you'll get to that awesome, closing 10 minutes. And then Hameka's, kind of the powerhouse, one of the big powerhouses of Stardom. She would fit right into, but I'm guessing it's Micah. Because she's had big world title matches. And like you brought up, Starlight Kid, I don't know how many people know this. She is the most popular women's wrestler in all of Japan based off votes.
Really?
The recent vote that they did?
Yes.
TV vote?
Yeah, so the TV vote.
The one that Okada won overall.
Yes. So she finished 11th overall. And the only people she came after were New Japan's top stars. So Okada, Tanahashi, Ospreay, I think Jay White, Minoru Suzuki, I think was in there, even though he's not necessarily top star, but a legend. Keiji Muto. Those are all the people she finished after. That's it. Like she finished after 10 people Tetsuya Naito, of course. She finished after people you'd expect.
She finished after names.
Yeah, and then she was right there on the cusp of top 10. So, and she's only 20 years old.
20.
So she's only 20 years old.
I would just say, like, I think there's a little bit of potential there.
They
might be able to crack the diamond a little bit on that one.
Really do something with this kid, yeah.
So she's like, I've pretty much said on my show, she will probably be the face of Stardom very soon. She learned under Mayu Iwatani. She's in a different group now, but that popularity speaks for itself, really, and she's great already at the age.
Yeah, she is. She really is.
Okay, so there's a mixed tag, I think, at the crossover with Tom Lawler. Are those two wrestlers in the Grand Prix right now?
Yeah, so that's probably going to be so it's Shuri and Julia. At least Julia's teaming with Zack Sabre Jr., I believe. I think it's Tom and Shuri. So Shuri is the world champion. She is the world champion. And Julia, if she wins the 5-star Grand Prix, she's wrestling Shuri at the Wrestle Kingdom for Stardom, which is on the
So
December
this is a
29th.
heater match for that match.
Oh, yeah. When people saw it was announced, they're like, oh, all right, we know who's winning. I was like,
that was what we call a tell for people in the know.
Yeah, so if Julia doesn't win on Saturday, I don't know what happened. I'll just say that.
So I twisted their ankle in there.
Everything that you know is wrong.
There you go.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at these standings over here, which is I got another monitor over this way, which is why I'm looking off camera because I'm just trying to figure this whole thing out with the red stars and the blue stars and things. So is this kind of parity booking? Is this common, or is there similar to what we see in New Japan, where there are the elite guys, where each faction kind of has a guy that's the contender for the IWGP title, the Okada, Jay White, Naito, and I guess LIJ has Shingo also, but and then there's the guys that maybe are very, very, very good, sometimes main event, but not quite at that elite level. That's where you get your Sonatas and all that. Do these groups have that, or is this kind of chaos on top, which is wonderful because there's so much intrigue going into the last day of this tournament? Is this kind of parity more along the lines of anyone can win, or is there like those levels that we see in New Japan?
Anyone can win. That's I think why I like Stardom so much is they're not afraid to push new people. I'm not saying New Japan isn't. I'm just saying that's something that it's something that they do so well that I don't think a lot of promotions do, right? So, for example, Mirai, who is out of the competition, but she just joined Stardom this year. She won their Cinderella tournament earlier this year, which usually goes to the Wonder of Stardom title. She won that right off the rip. She came from TJPW. For those who don't know who TJPW is, if you watch AEW TV, you'll see their stars from time to time. Yuka Sakazaki, Miyu Yamashita, for example. Maki Ito. There we go. That's a very popular one. So she came over there. She won the first tournament, has had big matches, established, right? Established out the gate. She didn't win, but she's established. Stardom will do the same. Now, I think this year they're going with two of the main elite stars in the finals with Tam Nakano and Julia. I personally think that because there's a lot of story there, but they wouldn't be afraid to put Micah in there, who is number 2 to Julia, right? She's number 2 in DDM. She's had challenges, but some people like to call her the Godo, but she's not that old yet, so we'll see. We'll see if she's the Godo.
Right.
But yeah, they're not afraid to do that. And if you're looking at the standings right now, Suzu Suzuki, that's my favorite example. She doesn't work for Stardom. She just turned 20 years old. Just did.
It's crazy.
And she's legitimately one of the best in the world. And despite her not being signed, they're willing to put her up there because her and Julia have the story on the final night. And pretty much the winner of that match is moving on. So easy, great story there. They've set it up perfectly. And you actually are going into this final night saying, you know what? Anyone could make it. That's pretty cool.
And it's interesting too, like you mentioned, the parity, anyone can win. Well, there has never been a 2-time winner of the 5-Star Grand Prix. They do pass this around. It's not something that's dominated by any one person. And Jeremy, I was just looking at this list here, and of course Scott knows it probably by heart, but some of the names that are in this that have won this tournament, though, we mentioned Io Shirai, Kairi, but also Toni Storm has won this tournament. Let's see, the late Hana Kimura, which that we all went through that sad story with Hana coming off the reality TV show and things there. But she was great, and she's won this tournament before. As Tessa Blanchard has been the runner-up in this. I'm just kind of looking at these names right here.
Tough. But
what's that?
I said that was tough, but we moved.
Yeah, hey. But also
Tessa Blanchard.
But you can also see names like B Priestley has not won one of these, but she has been a champion there, and so World, of course that's Blair Davenport now in WWE. Yes. So there are just a very recent history of some people that have made big splashes in the United States, yeah, I mean, just looking at this list, and there's a lot of talent that's been part of this tournament, and then we're going to be getting to see a lot more of it.
So that brings me to my next question, Scott. How far back does Stardom talent, like the talent that started there, all the way back? What names do we know that have made their impact in like WWE, Impact, AEW, places that viewers might not realize that these wrestlers had time at Stardom? Are there names besides Tessa Blanchard? Was WWE talent that before they ever went there? Are there names that you can think of that spent time at Stardom before that people might not know?
So a lot of people have been over for at least a tour. I think that's my best way to say it. Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, has been over for a tour in Stardom.
I thought that was rough.
She didn't learn much.
I had no idea. Was
over like you said, Tessa Blanchard was over there. Of course, Tessa Blanchard, But Toni Storm is the only woman in Stardom ever to win the Cinderella and 5-Star Grand Prix in the same year. So there's a little fact for you. Kairi, Io, those are obviously those are the cheat codes. I just had someone on my brain and they just fell out. But I think Brandy Rose has been there. if I don't, Santana Garrett. Do you remember Santana Garrett?
Yes, I do.
She was a Wonder of Stardom champion there.
Was Evie there before she was Evie there before she was Dakota Kai?
Yes, she was. She was there as Evie. She won a title there. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but Ruby Soho at one time, I think as Heidi Lovelace was there. It's pretty much like any prominent indie wrestler has at least had a walk in the park. Unfortunately, I still wait to say that Sasha Banks has been there. She hasn't. Waiting for that day. Haven't gotten that yet. But yeah, I mean, there's so many names that if you just Blair Davenport, Bea Priestley. I mean, there's an AEW show where she walks out there with the World of Stardom title on.
I remember
so you
that.
can kind of see the people around 2013, 2018, that period. Now they're established. They've taken their experience all over the world, and now they're doing the TV gig stateside because they have the pedigree from all over the place. So
and it's interesting because I think you kind of seen those wrestlers grow to move on to the TV gig, and you've watched Stardom grow to not bring over all these talents as much anymore because they have such a bigger roster. They don't necessarily need to bring in, all these outsiders for the bottom of their card to fill it out. They have so many wrestlers now.
What's their system for bringing in new people? Do they train them themselves mostly and then debut them as kind of finished products? Is there something similar to the Young Lion program that New Japan has? How do they do it?
So they've slowed down a lot, actually. Once COVID hit, they just had their first new trainee since 2020, I believe, this year, which is not usual for them because if you go through the Stardom roster, I mean, a lot of the mainstays, like I said, Mayu Iwatani, but Momo Watanabe, Starlight Kid, they're all Stardom trainees. But their new skill is to bring in big names from outside or bring in names that didn't get a chance to fully establish themselves and then make them their own star. Shuri is a different case because, like I said, former UFC fighter, but she did do Joshi beforehand. She wrestled Asuka, of course, Kana a lot back in the day. Like she did a lot of Joshi indies, and now she's a big name here. Julia didn't start in Stardom. She came over from Iceland, like I said. There's a lot, like there's a faction there's one faction that's Queen's Quest. They're all homegrown. Every single talent there's homegrown.
Okay.
So that's best way to look. Like it's Fukigen Death. If you know who Fukigen Death is, she's a clown character. But before that, her name is Kaori Oniyama, who is somewhat of a Joshi legend. But she, when she was most popular, when Joshi wasn't as popular, unfortunately, that was her heyday. With Emi Sakura and Meiko Satomura.
I got a question for you about that clown. When I was doing research, is that the really unsettling clown reading the newspaper?
Yes.
Okay.
She happens to be a great wrestler.
Speak of, and I had questions. I think you've touched on it, but I think I just have to see it in action.
Yeah, you do. You sure do. And I'd love for you to watch one of those and then watch one of her like real matches and be like, what happened? It's like a switch flips.
Yeah, I'm sorry to stop you cold right there, but no, I saw that clown. Yeah. That clown is unsettling.
He's not. Jeremy's not okay about this clown, Scott. He's not. He's not all right.
The clown smokes in the middle of matches. I mean, I don't blame you.
Sure.
Start smoking. Meiko Satomura, by the way, was the other one that I never brought up. She was in Stardom. Okay. She's a former World of Stardom champion. Of course, I think she's still in WWE. I think. I'm not sure. I know she lost the belt.
She's currently in NXT right now.
Okay.
She does not have her title anymore.
I saw her fight Roxanne. That was good.
To Mandy Rose, but she has been doing. She has been doing matches with Cora Jade and Roxy, kind of.
That was good.
Kind of an intermediary between their feud and kind of a proxy to keep that thing going forward.
Meanwhile, she owns a promotion still in Japan. I don't know if anyone knows that. She owns Sendai Girls, but she's focused on. She is focused on WWE for the time being, which is great because she's a great trainer.
Immensely talented.
Yeah.
I could watch Meiko Satomura matches all day long.
Was she the one? Was she the one in Gaia Girls? That documentary, was that her?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, that was really good too. If you can find that somewhere, I watched it on the YouTubes.
I think it's on YouTube.
Yeah, that was so that was an old one. That goes back a ways now. I think she was a rookie in that one, wasn't she?
She's in one of my favorite matches of all time. So versus Akira Hogato, which is also on YouTube. So there you go. YouTube,
Akira Hogato, one of the all-time greats, definitely.
Yeah.
So that was all that stuff going back. Are there do we know who's a lot of their trainers? I know like the Yuji Nagata and Tenzan work with a lot of the young lions and things in the New Japan. Do we know who's working there?
I forget the guy's name. There is a trainer now. But the interesting thing is that a lot of them do their training within their faction. Like a faction is a faction to the core, that they hang out together, they work together, they're friends, that's how they develop. Yeah. The wrestler who trains the most, probably like trains the most wrestlers, is Hazuki, who has retired previously and come back. She was training before that. She's also only like 25 years old, so that she's retired already and come back. But she's one of the main ones in terms of wrestler. That's something she loves doing. But yeah, they really train in their bubbles. There is a main trainer, I can't remember his name, because they don't talk about him. But
yeah, it's not up front. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So I got one last question for you, and I don't know how many more questions Conway has for you, but if you're watching Stardom year round, is there a periods of time that is more like off season? How like there's the New Japan Cup, and then a kind of couple months, and then it goes to Dominion, and then there's a little bit of a break, and then you have the G1, and then they have a couple of lower card tournaments before they get to their the pull off at the end of the year. Is there something like that, or is it just we're going year round, people? Like everything is important.
Oh, there's an off season. Okay. So once the 5-Star Grand Prix starts, which I believe it started in the end of July, that pretty much is nonstop until the Stardom Dream Kingdom show, which again I reference as their Wrestle Kingdom, because they do that tournament, then they do Tag League. They're now doing the IWGP tournament. So they're packed until the end of the year. Then the opening months, they will build to their big pay-per-view in March. They don't have an official recurring name. There's just always a big pay-per-view in March. Last year was their biggest pay-per-view ever, All-Star Dream Cinderella. This year was Stardom World Climax, a 2-night event. A little copying of New Japan there. Thankfully, that doesn't seem we're keeping that. The 2-night event's a little too much. And then after that is when we go into Cinderella Tournament. And the Cinderella Tournament isn't really as taxing as the 5-Star Grand Prix because it's a round. It's the equivalent of the New Japan Cup. It's bracket based. You work to the top. Each match is 10 minutes. And the trick is there. You can get eliminated via over the top rope as well, which, and if you go to draw. Yeah, because why not? That tournament's been extended. It used to be a 1-night event. It's been extended to a couple shows because you can sell tickets. You're selling tickets. So that, and then after that, until the 5-Star Grand Prix, they'll just have some big pay-per-views. But other than that, it's like, as I like to call house show hell, where it's like, they're resting finally. But there's not a lot of downtime because they've started to do a pay-per-view once a month now. Okay. So, but their house shows like you can tell if you're watching a house show what kind of day it is. If it's a Cork and Hall, you're going all out. If it's even if it's just the Edion Osaka Arena, they're like, all right, we'll take the night off.
So we're going to be seeing them in the Tokyo Dome. We're going to be seeing them at Osaka Joe Hall as part of Dominion. That's where Dominion usually is. And then a few other events on the New Japan calendar in addition to the stuff in the United States. Don't know about Tamashi yet, the new Oceania tour, but it's possible. Could be part of that. For Stardom, what is their main building? Everyone runs Korakuen Hall and things, but their big events, you said Nippon Budokan is one they've used before. Like what kind of buildings do they go to when we're blowing off some storylines and having big matches?
So they're as I continuously call it, the Wrestle Kingdom of their brand. The Stardom Dream Kingdom began last year. This is the second year they're running it, so it seems like it's going to stick. They run that at Ryogoku Sumo Hall. That seems to be their place for the big.
Okay.
And they have done Osaka Joe Hall. That was where the Stardom World Climax was, or was that Ryogoku? I don't know. They all meshed together after a while. I think it was this, all the shows meshed together, not necessarily the arenas. Corkin's their big house show in terms of you'll get a title match or a big match, but it's not as big as it used to be their biggest show. And then they got bigger and bigger and bigger. They don't treat it like New Japan yet, but we're getting there. Right? Like it's not just another location. Even though I do know New Japan does run once in a while big like trios, and they're kind of starting to get to that. Stardom is. But like for example, their tournament wise, those have been their biggest shows, the Cork and Hall shows. Those have been their biggest tournament shows. So it's interesting because like sometimes they won't care about Corkin, and sometimes it's like, oh, this is huge. Yeah, it's a game they play, but they do run. Their ultimate goal is to run the Tokyo Dome. It will not happen soon. They are building, but they will get there. I'm pretty sure. I think their main goal was like 2025. I think that's what they said. We'll see what happens, but as long as you're doing these good numbers in Osaka Joe Hall and Ryogoku, I think they'll play with those two as their big ones. Maybe Osaka Joe Hall gets taken away now that COVID's hopefully slowing down a little bit more, but Ryogoku seems to be the one.
All right. So let's see. Again, your prediction is that in the coming off this tournament, you believe that Julia is going to win the 5-star. So not her. So just again, your thoughts: Kyrie on one side, and you said Starlight on the other. That's your guess right now.
Mayu Iwatani.
Yes. Oh, you think Iwatani's going to get it? Okay, pardon. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's no one that exemplifies what Stardom is more than Mayu Iwatani. So I think it would be wrong in what will be their biggest, most viewed match ever.
Mm-hmm.
It would be wrong for her not to be in it. That's why I think it should be her and Kyrie with their history, with the size of that match. They're probably the two most known, though I'm starting to see more and more people know who Julia is and Utami, but to me, it's still those two.
Starting with your flagship person, so to speak, and then also maybe the biggest international star that you have makes a ton of sense, because then when you do put Julia or Starlight Kid or Shuri or Tam Nakano in with them, you've got that base. So like, okay, I know who that is. Who's this person that's going toe to toe with them in this amazing match? Now you have 4 stars. Then you have 8 stars. Then you have, that's always the strategy here, of course. And this is a promotion, Stardom here, that has the talent to do things like that. I think we're going to see some really special stuff. It's going to be different. The stuff that you see, the great matches in WWE and AEW, on the women's side, these are going to look totally different. They're going to feel totally different. And I think that there's a lot of room for this, and to love all of it, and to really introduce a different style of wrestling to people who maybe haven't seen it before. I'm really fired up about it, if you can't tell.
Yeah,
I think the ceiling of the title that they're introducing here to the domestic audience, it may settle to like adjacent to the IWGP United States title, kind of how it's defended, but it's never going to be bigger than this title right here, right now. So if you put Kairi Sane and as you're saying, Mayu Utami in there, it's going to seem like one of the biggest titles in the world. It will be up to the company to maintain that level of prominence. My suspicion is it'll probably, because they want to maintain the strength of the other 2 titles, maybe settle in the dust a little bit. But when you come out the gate, it's why you gave Kenny Omega the United States title when it first came out. You put it on your big stars to establish that dominance.
Yeah, for sure. I think the best way to look at it is they've already announced the first title defense will be at Wrestle Kingdom. So big 2 matches right off the rip, right? Yeah. I think the best way to execute that title is continuously using it on the big New Japan shows. If you want to keep that title as important as possible while keeping your other main titles as important as possible, you just don't put them on the same show defended. I think that's the best way to look at it, right? Because then only one gets the main event at the end of the day. So I think keeping it on those New Japan shows and overall, I think this is where New Japan can blast off in the United States, because again, their whole goal is to have Stardom kind of flow into those US strong tapings, and even one match can
It's the
do a
X
lot.
factor that is missing. I've gone to a lot of New Japan shows live, and there is an X factor when you go to other shows and you see the women's wrestling, and to know that there's a possibility down the line that Stardom talent will be on these New Japan shows that I could buy a ticket and go see live is an incredibly appealing idea.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it almost made me go to New York. So it almost did, but I didn't get announcements, so I was like, God.
And I think just as a fan of the whole Japanese wrestling cultures, I'm very relieved that New Japan just didn't open a women's division and start signing people away from their regular companies. Let's have the best women's company and the best men's company work together on this and not cannibalize one for the other. I think everyone's worst fear when the idea of having women's matches in New Japan came up was, oh, now Stardom is going to become 2 or 3 matches on a New Japan show. Thankfully, that's not the way we're going. We're going to be seeing some of the best women's wrestlers in the world in an environment where they can really shine and thrive. And hopefully it'll bring that type of wrestling to a whole new audience, which I think is Bushiroad's entire plan here.
Yeah, Historic Crossover is one of the most exciting shows of the year because of the direction it can go, right? I mean, the Bushiroad president Kadani has said he wants Stardom to main event that show. Will that happen? I don't know. You have a title match. You have right. Like, you have the IWGP Women's title being like you're crowning that champion. If there's any match that's going to main event for Stardom, it would be that one.
I don't think Jay White's defending the title on that show.
Well, Jay White never defends the title, so
there you go.
But that's my New Japan problem.
But I digress.
I don't need to go into that. But yeah, I think like either that or a big mixed tag, which they've already announced 3. Could I tell you them off the top?
That main event women's title that should send people home on that title.
Yeah, I think they got Tanahashi and Utami teaming up, which that was kind of the give to me that it won't be Mayu Iwatani, because if there were anyone to team up, it would have been those two, and then probably Okada and Utami, because that's kind of the closest comparisons I have for those two. I mean, I know it's dangerous to go into Ace Hiroshi Tanahashi territory. Trust me, it's one of my favorites of all time. But if I'm going to give it to anyone, it would be Mayu. So when I saw those announced, I was like, all right, you're kind of giving me a hint of who's going to be there. And then they announced everyone, but Mayu wasn't on the card. So I was like, all right, sounds good.
Put the stick in the water, kind of read the tea leaves. Right?
There you go.
Yeah. I was like, all right, cool. They're going with my plan. That's the best plan for me. Will it be the plan? I hope so. I hope they deliver.
All right. Anything else from you, Jeremy?
I think we have learned everything that we need to know about Stardom going into the next few months here at Speaking of Strong Style. So mission accomplished.
Scott, is there anything you need to add? Do you feel like there's anything that we haven't asked about that you feel like would help us understand this better?
I think just when it comes to watching Joshi, don't go in expecting anything, because I think a lot of people who have watched women's wrestling, not you two necessarily, but if you watch AEW women's wrestling, you're gonna be hit with something totally different, right? So always go in these things with an open mind, because you're gonna develop favorites very quickly. There is a character, there's a wrestler for everyone, if that makes sense. They jump off the page in a lot of ways. The reason I loved New Japan from the start was because of their different characters. You had, the anti-hero and Naito. You had the clear face of the company in Okada, but I picked Tanahashi because he's the guy that pushed them through everything, and the ace, right? And the same thing happened to me in Stardom. Mayu Iwatani is now my favorite wrestler of all time because that's who she is, that ace that helped them carry through the rough patches. I mean, I don't know if anyone who's listening to this knows this, but Stardom at the beginning of 2020, Kagetsu, who retired, that was a big loss. Former World of Stardom champion. Arisa Shiki, who was the Wonder of Stardom champion at the time, wrestled Mayu Iwatani on the very, very first show of Stardom history. Won. She was a prodigy. She had 150 matches in her career. She had to retire due to injury. And then, of course, Hana Kimura passed away 2 days after. 2 days after. So coming out of the COVID break, they had to rebuild.
They sounded like they were reeling.
Yeah. It's 3 big losses like that. It's hard to imagine for any promotion in any way. Not, losing Hana the way Hana, passed away is just a whole different beast. But they had to rebuild. They went with who they went with. And now we're sitting here, and I can firmly say they're the number 2 promotion in Japan. So it's a promotion worth investing into because they invest in their wrestlers, and hopefully they make fans out of everyone. So yeah, that's my best way to kind of give you an idea of what they've been able to do over the past couple of years, especially because, again, those 3 losses in different various ways, it's tough. And now they're here. So, and we're going to a historic crossover. Very exciting show. Happy they're doing it. Hopefully they keep doing it. I think that could be a special event. Something like, the Cyber Fight Festival, better, because it seems like these 2 promotions will really want to work together, which is really exciting to see.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, Scott Edwards. 5 Star Joshi Show is available on the Fight Game Media Network. You can get it in the podcast feed. There are going to be clips, I believe, on the YouTube show as well, on the YouTube channel as well. But you can find it regularly, and I definitely recommend it. It's terrific, terrific wrestling. It's a terrific culture, and Scott will tell you all about it there and help you follow along. Jeremy, first, Scott, pardon me, our guest. What are your social? Anyway, how do people follow you? How do they find you out there?
You can follow me at Scott E Wrestling on Twitter, and that's the best way to find all my content because I probably tweet it like 75 times. So, and I apologize to the people, but I want people to read it. I want people to listen to it because what I'm doing, I very much believe in, and yeah, that's the best way. That's place to find me. Otherwise, you can't find me anywhere else. Sorry.
Engaging and fun work. Thank you. You can find me at Chair Firestone on Twitter. Basically the best place. Come at me, holler at me. Don't yell at me. I'm sensitive. I have feelings.
And I'm at Stephen Conway 88 on Twitter, and you can also find my historical website, ringsidereplay.com. So with that, I want to say again, big thanks to Scott Edwards, our guest today from the 5 Star Joshi Show. For Jeremy Feinstein, I'm Stephen Conway. Thank you for watching the special edition of Speaking of Strong Style. We'll see you again very soon.